Well, nice to meet
Hi,
you.
everyone.
You too, Keri.
So
Nice to
I've
meet you
just
too,
let
Chris.
everyone into the waiting room. Everyone should be joining. I'm so excited to have everybody here today. The panelists and I have just been chit-chatting while we were waiting for everyone to join us. So welcome. I've been looking forward to this all day because I'm so passionate about podcasting. And also, everyone that's on the panel here today are rockstar podcasters, have done incredible things. And I'm really excited to share their successes and their tips in addition to what I'll be doing. If you are not talking, if you could just mute yourself, I will try to mute people as well, just so we have as little background noise as possible. I'm muting a couple of people here. So I just want to start with talking about why I did this panel. So I several years ago went through a major life change. I've been working in government and politics, and then I became unemployed due to the recession. I was also going through a really bad divorce. I was physically ill. Every area of my life was a mess. And I went through this major kind of healing transformation. I opened up psychically, had an angelic visitation experience, and my life completely changed. And through that whole process, I had struggles with health. And when I was going through a lot of, the typical things that you do to try to get better, I wasn't getting better. And so I did find some alternative practitioners and different approaches that helped me. So I initially started my podcast, Healing Powers Podcast, about 10 years ago to share information that had helped me on my healing journey. And I didn't even think of myself as a practitioner at that point. I just was like, I lost about 50 pounds. I healed all these health issues that I was told were chronic lifetime conditions. My life got better. I started making more money. Like all these things shifted. And I wanted to share with other people what helped me. And so even though I felt like brand new into this whole other world, I felt like, well, I have these practitioners, I have these people I connect with. So I started a podcast really to share their messages. And the beautiful thing about an interview format show is when you connect with people and interview them, you receive knowledge from them. And I believe you also receive energy from them. And so it's an incredible win-win situation where you're learning as a host, your guest is sharing their knowledge and information, probably they're getting clients from that as well, your listeners are receiving. And so I just really grew to love it, and I saw what it did for me and my business. And one of the interesting things about podcasting is I was not a podcast listener when I got the message to podcast. A lot of people start listening to podcasts and they're like, wow, this is cool. But this was literally just a psychic and intuitive message that I got like to start it. And I had to figure out what the heck a podcast was. And this was a very different time in terms of podcasting. Like now, it's very easy to start a podcast, and we can talk a little bit about that later. But then it was a lot harder. I had to figure it all out, not a tech person, figured it out. And then through the podcasting journey, as I started to interview more people, learn more, I started to feel more like, hey, I have something personally to share. So I started my business as a psychic and started to share information. And then I started to share that on my podcast as well. And my business grew very quickly. So a lot of psychics, if you're not familiar, don't do very well financially. I saw somewhere in an article that it's typical, like maybe $10,000 a year. So I now have a multiple six-figure business, which I'm growing very quickly in this area that is often challenging for people to have as a successful business. And the reason I'm bringing this up is whatever you do, whatever your interests are, whatever your business is, you can use podcasting to grow it, and you can do that very quickly. So happy to talk about this. And that's my story with podcasting. And then I want to introduce our different pro podcaster panelists today and hear a bit about their story. And then we'll dive into some different aspects of podcasting that I'd like to share with everyone. So I'm just going to start with the way I see everyone on my screen in terms of the panelists. So Chris, let's start with you. If you can just share a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got into podcasting and why.
Sure, but I want to kind of say, like, I shouldn't be going first. This lady's first goes against everything I believe, and being from Charleston, South Carolina originally. Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Ross. I have made
I
my
love you
bones
more
in
already, Chris, I have to say.
I made my bones in entrepreneurship through education, sales, complete. When I say the word sales, people usually have their own experience depending on what that is. They go, oh, I spent a lot of time in the education space on really qualifying a buyer. And of course, I've studied, a lot of the human brain psychology to biology, about what you're sparking with different chemicals when you're, having a conversation. I was just kind of sharing a brief Think I was on a panel earlier today talking a little bit more in depth about emotional intelligence with Laura. And that's what I really do for a living. And prior, then when I stuck myself out there in entrepreneurship, I started doing it consulting for companies and corporations and teaching them why it's not a question for them to develop more emotional intelligence and more knowledge when it pertains to your buyers and what you're trying to accomplish. And that was kind of like my start, and started rubbing elbows with the right people in the education space. And for those who do not know, in trade schools, they get their leads from certain areas and certain funnels. Well, before the social media boom, especially when Facebook took off and bought Instagram, you've seen a huge growth. Like, bam, everyone's doing internet marketing. Well, a lot of these people, when they're doing internet marketing and trying to do a consulting business, they don't know how to structure their programs to get maybe potentially nationally accredited. A lot of different ways. That there's so many holes with the curriculum and what they're actually giving their buyers, because everyone can do a shiny object syndrome and shiny object program, but what are you leading them to? They don't start with the outcome in mind. So that's kind of like the first part. Then I built 2 trade schools myself and sold those to trade schools. So I've done this myself. Then I was like, what do I do now? So that's when I decided to come up with the podcast. I've been asked for years to do a podcast, and I've never really wanted to entertain that thought because I was doing so many other things in entrepreneurship. So when I structured the contracts with the trade school, 60 of them that I sold the programs to. I structured it within those contracts. They had to listen to the first couple of seasons of the win-win effect. That's what I do, the win-win effect. So it's the effect from that way of looking at everyone's got to win. Everyone's going to win if you're doing it the right ways and morally and ethically. So now my newest venture, after the podcast took off, had over 2 million downloads the first year, which blew me away. I was like, why are these people listening to me? Like, why is everyone listening to me? But now, of course, I went to the 3rd season after I sold those 2 programs to start bringing on guests. And that's where it really took off. And I came to, like, a light bulb went off, no hair. So it probably went ding. And I was like, what if I'm able to kind of show people how to really structure and have a format with their podcast show to reach the right people that need to tune in? Because we're in a space right now, anybody that, can put a microphone in their face and start speaking. But who are you speaking to? Are you plugged into the right source? Are you plugged into a network? That's where, I started, reached out to a couple of friends of mine. I think we all know here as the panelists, Justin Shank, Adam Shively, Brian Bogart. If you don't know their names, it's fine. Right. But they've done podcasting. Bogart's come out with more of his emotional intelligence and human behavior specialist, been on tons of shows. It's like, how do we develop a community first, focus on collaboration, and then looked at more of collective impact and getting more eyeballs on your show? Because there's nothing more heartbreaking is when you have a great message and no one's listening.
So
You know what I mean?
true.
So
And there's a lot of
right,
podcasters that
100%.
are like running their head up against the wall for that reason.
Right. And that's just like in a nutshell. And I'll throw it over to Keri and Wendy, which I do. I was having a conversation earlier today. Adam was like, I know, Wendy, you're going to go on panelists. I'm like, oh, I can't wait. So I'm looking forward to hopefully serving everybody here. And maybe I just sprinkle a little bit of knowledge and you take something from it. And here we are. Right. And just have some fun.
Amazing. So yeah, a couple things I want to mention from that. So Adam Shively could not be here today, unfortunately, but he is one of the guest speakers in the next podcasting course that I'm launching on Thursday. He's awesome. One of the things that I love about podcasting is it's such an incredible community. And unlike some other communities that I've been in, it's such a supportive community. It's all about everyone helping each other, rising up together, supporting each other. So I met Adam through Allison Melody, who's another incredible podcaster, and he connected me with Chris. As soon as Chris and I connected, I was like, yay, we definitely have to do stuff. And that's one of the things that podcasting is so great about, is it really helps you build relationships in business, personally. And it's like nothing else that I've ever experienced in terms of that ability to do that and to do that very quickly. So thanks for giving a shout out to Adam. He's incredible. And yeah, this is a wonderful thing. And it is the case that a lot of people start a podcast and then it's like crickets. Adam actually talks about this. So that's one of the things that it's really important to start the podcast and then make sure that you are doing some of the strategies so that you hit the ground running and you don't feel like you're wasting your time. So thanks so much, Chris. We'll come back to you. Let's go to Keri. I'd love to hear your story, and then also specifically about podcasting, because I think yours is really fun.
Okay, thanks for having me here today, Laura. It's so good to be here, and nice to meet you, Chris, and good to see you, Wendy, and to see familiar faces that I know in the audience. So for me, podcasting was something that I learned about, well, many years ago, but like Laura, I actually didn't listen to them. And I actually did a training about 6 years ago to have my first podcast, but I never did it. I'm sure I'm not the only one in the crowd who has been considering a podcast for years and not doing it. And then I met Laura, and Laura convinced me with her passion and her love, without convincing at all, because of her passion and love of podcasting, to join her in her training last round of podcasting. And so I launched my podcast last round. Well, when was that? November.
We
launched
started
November.
the course in September, and then you launched in
November. So I've been doing coaching and mentoring for like 14 years. I help people with their money mindset and help people to shift out of stuck behaviors around money and wealth and to become financially sovereign. And so the more last year unfolded, the way that the year unfolded, the more that I knew that my voice needed to find its way to a home that was not being censored places, that could really share deep messages, that I was so excited to interview people who are in this field and bring, like you, Laura, with health stuff, but for me with financial stuff, to really bring the relevant information that's not being heard in many places to the forefront of education. And so with Laura's passion, it just became like obvious thing I had to go do and be a podcast. And once I started, and I will say, as someone who's been through the training that she does, the reason I didn't podcast before was because just because you know how to do it, the physical aspect of podcasting does not actually mean that anyone will watch your show, that you will amount to anything, that you will get your voice heard, any of that. Just because you can physically, literally put a podcast onto Apple platform does not mean any of the beyond. And so for me, I didn't want that. I wanted to make sure that I was knowing how to monetize it, that it was going to get heard, that it was going to be seen, and that I was going to be listened to, because otherwise it's not worth my time or money to do it. Because I will definitely say it is a learning curve. I will say, as a new person in this field, because I'm sure some of you have forgotten, having done this for years, there is a learning curve that comes to starting your podcast. And it has taken me some time and energy to really find a way to make this so that it's easeful in my schedule, and so that there has a system and that I know what I'm doing and all that kind of stuff. But it does take time and energy. And it's like, we all want to have, if we're in business, like, what's the return on our energy and our return on our money to be able to do these things? And so for me, doing the training with Laura meant that I then finished the training. I launched my podcast, and within a week, I had sent Laura a message that I'd ranked on top 20, top 30, and top 100 charts in the world in Australia, Mexico, and New Zealand, which is phenomenal in the world of podcasting. I had so many people tell me that it could take years, months, it could take years for people to hear it. It could take years for people to rank. And, and I honor the fact that I obviously had people following before, but also because Laura has been with me, Laura, Wendy, Adam, all the people that you'll meet, not Chris, because Chris wasn't there. Is Chris going to be a panelist in the, Chris wasn't in the last one, but everybody who was there has been such high quality mentors for me. And I've learned so much through all of these amazing people, that I've been able to really step in and just go right away and get amazing feedback. People already sending me messages about like what they've been learning, how in alignment it is. And so I just know, and like, I just have the faith and the trust. And I think this is part of, I guess I'm going to speak from a new person in the podcasting realm, because I know I'm the only new one here, that it doesn't necessarily, that it takes time. Like, all of this takes time to get. And I just feel like and I have trust and I have faith, because I have such amazing mentors sitting in front of me saying, I have 6 and 7 figure businesses that are 95% grown from my podcast that I'm like, well, that just gets to be me too. And it doesn't actually have to take a long time, but it does take dedication and persistence and the desire to have, for me personally, my message heard to the world. And so I thank everybody here for being part of that journey, but it's been such a remarkable journey for me.
Yeah, and Keri's even being a little humble, but I mean, I think you were number 3 in Mexico, and what were you in Australia? It was quite high.
In Australia, I did end up hitting somewhere under 100, or somewhere like in the 80s or something. But
Yeah,
when you think of the country and the platform, that was huge.
yeah.
It was
And
huge.
I think you were in the wealth, was it the wealth or
Uh-huh.
business category?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is really big. A lot of
And like the people
for
who were
years
like ranking next to me that were like, oh, you should follow this podcast underneath me, were like Tim Ferriss. You sent me the picture. You're like, Keri, it's like Tim Ferriss and some other really big name.
Right.
And I was like, of course, Tim Ferriss's podcast is being ranked next to mine. Okay, totally logical.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was
Exactly.
big.
So I just think that's really exciting that you can be a new podcaster and still reach, incredible people. And what Keri mentioned is that, yeah, like 90 to 95% of my business, I can tie to podcasting in one way or another. I mean, it's pretty incredible. And as an example, there's one small podcast appearance that I can tie 50K of revenue to, which for my business is significant, depends on your business. But in my case, that was a big deal. Other small ones, multiple 5 figures of revenue that have come in. And I think Wendy's are even higher. Well, we'll get to her in a minute. So thank you, Keri. I'm so excited for you. And I know you've already had a lot of success with podcasting, but I know that there's so much more that's going to come.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Wendy, let's hear from you a little bit about your business, your story, your journey on podcasting.
Yes. So I started my podcast about 8 years ago, and I think we're edging in on 370 shows now. And I can't even believe that. And so it's one of those things where, you have to start somewhere, and you start doing a podcast every week, and it just snowballs. And it's amazing that it's 8 years later, I'm still going strong and still really loving what I'm doing and super passionate. And it really has, for me, I started as a health coach and helping people to detox heavy metals. And that's my focus. And, but my podcast started as kind of, just everything about health. And then, but when I really focused in, and I changed it used to be the Live to 110 podcast. And then I realized like nobody wants to live to 110. Like people even email me like, why would I want to live to 110? I'm barely pushing 80. And so I decided to refocus it and niche in a little bit more and just only focus on heavy metals. And we had to rebrand and change it to the Myers Detox Podcast. And that was a total nightmare, but it was totally worth it because I feel like we've just, get more focused people. I think it's really important to really niche in as much as you can. I know some that are just about, fertility, the whole podcast is about that. And so that's really helped my business a lot because I sell detox supplements. I have detox programs. We have health coaching. We've also ventured into bioenergetics, which I find really fascinating as well, because that also helps facilitate detox. So it kind of plays into that. And so for me, doing the podcast really helps people to get to know me and positions me as an expert. And then they want to seek out my products and programs as a result of listening to me speaking. And so for me, that's really, really helped me grow quite a bit. And it also helps with, within your community, your colleagues, also you can do trades with people. Like I have people that will say, hey, you can come on my podcast and get some exposure in exchange for emailing about my liver green supplement or what have you. And then also I can use the podcast as a platform to speak on online summits. And that gives me a tremendous amount of exposure. I'll get, several thousand people sign up on my email list from speaking on one online summit, but I have to, in exchange for that promotion, I have to promote that online summit, whether it's like the Limitless Energy Summit or a thyroid summit or what have you. So, so it just, there's kind of like this cross marketing that can happen because you establish this platform, using the podcast.
Yeah. And one thing you brought up is this idea of like kind of trading or supporting each other. I think that's one of the incredible things about podcasting. So a huge element of growing my business has also been media and getting media placements for myself. I've been, if you're not familiar with me, I've been on some pretty big media. I've been on Will Ferrell's podcast. I've been featured by BuzzFeed, lots of television shows, and several of the television show placements that I've had, I got from learning about it from a different podcaster. Like basically, so even though I did then take action, I wouldn't even have known about those opportunities if I hadn't heard about it from a podcaster. So just sharing that because it's really important. And I see a lot of people, like I get pitched a lot because I host several shows and several of them have been in the top 100. And people are like desperately trying to get on a show. I'm like, the best way to get on a show is to have a show, in my opinion. And it helps build relationships. So Wendy and I actually met at a party. We met at the Bulletproof launch party for Dave Asprey's book. And we both had been podcasting for a while, but like we're in still very different places in our business. But basically met Wendy, we were both podcasters. It was like, hey, let's help each other out, do their shows. And then we developed this, multiple year friendship as well as business partnership. So I'm an affiliate for Wendy. That's one of the ways you can monetize. So I'm wearing one of her products that I love, the Harmony pendant. And so, she's on my show, talk about it. It's just amazing how you can develop these long-term relationships and business relationships through podcasting. So Wendy, I know in the last panel, you talked a little bit about how even from one podcast episode appearance, you had such a great financial return. Would you mind sharing that as well?
Yeah, I was on the Dave Asprey Bulletproof radio show, which is like the #1 podcast. And granted, I was on it a while ago, but just that one appearance, I got 200 clients from it, charging $600 each, plus whatever supplements they purchased after the consult to do a detox program. And so that was the craziest podcast I've ever been on. But now I almost going on shows, I almost don't ever say no if someone asks me to be on their show. I always say yes, because even when I was starting on my podcast, I was always surprised. I would reach out to people and everybody said yes. Like even like the biggest names in health would come on the show, and I was like, they don't ever turn down any like free advertising because they don't know where that podcast is going to go. They don't know it's probably going to grow at some point, over time. And so that really struck me. And so now I'm kind of the same way. There's almost very few shows that I would say no to. Maybe if they're like starting out, it's like the first show, I have to, manage my time well, and have to have it for the time. My time's very valuable. I have to have, return on an investment of my time as well. But I find today, I very, very rarely will say no to any podcast that ask me to be on their show.
I think that's incredible. And the other thing is even big shows often start out as small shows. And so it really is about developing relationships. What I usually typically say, if it's someone outside of my circle, is I want you to have 10 episodes or more. If it's in my circle and I know you and I trust you and I know you're going to continue, like I'm happy to do it even sooner than that. But you also brought up something that's really important, is how people are looking to find shows as someone who has a business, and the importance of asking. So I'll share a story for myself. I was a pretty new podcaster, and I was lucky enough to be doing video for a conference where Bruce Lipton was speaking. And if you're in this sort of alternative health space, then you probably know Bruce Lipton. He's kind of a rock star in that space. He talks about epigenetics, and he, is a keynote speaker at like big, conferences. And I just went up to him and I said, hey, would you be on my podcast? And he normally has handlers, but because it was like in person, I was able to like talk with him in person, and he was like, sure. So we set up later in the day, did this recording. And once you get a big person, and don't be afraid to ask, because they may say yes, then it's a lot easier to get other people. I can't tell you how many times I was, asking someone to be a guest on my show, and I'd be like, here's my past guest, and it would include a Bruce Lipton, and they'd be like, well, yeah, I want to be on the show just for that reason. So that's one tip that I think is really beneficial and important for podcasting, is just to always ask. The worst someone can say is no, and you might be surprised that you get a yes. And the other thing is covering conferences, festivals, summits, whatnot, as a podcaster. Something a lot of podcasters don't know about, but you are press. And when I was first starting to podcast, this wasn't something that was fully recognized as much, that the podcasters are press people, but it's more and more recognized now. And I've gotten so many incredible opportunities to attend conferences for free, and then had access to speakers and people that I wouldn't have otherwise had access to as a podcaster. So the one exception to that is don't ask for a press pass to a podcasting conference, because they're all podcasters. So that's different. But that's a really wonderful way to network and connect. You get value out of it. You don't have to pay for this professional development. You get access to the speakers. And I have used that to get press passes to, the Cannes Film Festival, which is very difficult to get passes to, big conferences, then networked and connected with the speaker. So thanks, Wendy, for bringing up that idea, because I think it's really beneficial. So I'd love to shift to just specifically talking about, growing your podcast. What have you done to, grow it, and especially quickly? And when Chris, let's start with you, and then we'll kind of cycle through again. I know you started yours with a splash, with 2 million in the first year. So what were some of the strategies that you used to really get that engagement?
That's a really good question. I mean, a lot of people that think that they need to have a lot of marketing or doing Facebook ads or getting more eyeballs on their thing. It's pretty much just word of mouth. That's sort of reaching out to the contacts that I've already had. Like, hey, I'm going to give away a lot of value, especially in the first 2 seasons. It was just pretty much me I had a co-host at the time. His name was Wes Bays, and he was there, and I'm a person I trained for a while, and he came onto the show to kind of flesh out the information, because I could say, all right, let's talk about overcoming objections. Well, number one rule, I don't overcome them because I jump in front of them. So, but it's kind of hard to get out that flesh out that information. So I started reaching out to maybe some sales companies, or everyone wants to make money. Like, raise your hand if you want to make more money. Okay, so that's the only way to do it, right? So exactly. So the best way to doing it is it's like, all right, here, listen to this, and giving away free stuff. When I started interviewing guests, Wendy touched on one thing: is a lot of podcasters don't say no. I do say no if you're not purpose driven. That's the only time. The best way to get on someone else's show is have something very specific you want to talk to them about. Hey, I've been listening to your show, and I know that your purpose behind your show, and I was listening to this, and I heard you and Laura came on your show, and I would like to talk a little bit more about that topic, a little bit more in depth. Here's my idea, XYZ. And they'll go, oh, okay, this guy's listened to, or this gal's listened to the show. That's the best way to get on someone else's show, is presenting it that way. It's kind of like one of those things. I learned it from David Meltzer, is like being everywhere. The only way for you to be everywhere is to have substance and have something that people want to hear that you're talking about. Anyone can get on a show and just talk about anything. But I just pretty much just reached out to a lot of connections that I had, not just specifically in the podcast industry. I just started going, who do I know and what can I do to where, because, like Wendy's mentioning, like time, like where's that ROI on time? Like, time is the only non-renewable resource in life. If I'm spending a lot of time recording episodes and getting the podcast out there, I would much rather take my time and dumping in more content and more value into that show, and take other people that are enjoying the show, let them be my promoters, and they'll promote it for me. So that was one of my, I guess you would say, tactics right off the bat, is like, how can I get them, or give away something and talk about something that they wanted to hear and desperately needed to hear. And once I was able to land that first, I guess, Raven fan, or first set of Raven fans, I'm like, okay, now I'm on to something, they'll promote it for me. And that's where the ambassadorship comes from. So that's one tip, I guess. I hope that makes a little bit more sense. Or are you like trying to reach out and just like, okay, I'm gonna record it and I'll post it on Apple, or I'll post it on I don't know, people do marketing or whatnot. You can't just post it and hope people will listen. People aren't going to listen, especially the first segment of your show, the intro. I can't tell you how many people turn off your show and move on to the next one if you don't get their attention right from the beginning. That's difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think so much of it is about building community and getting
Yes.
people involved. And I think so, yeah, connecting with the people, the contacts that you already have, connecting with other podcasters, invite a podcaster that has a successful show to be on your show. And another strategy that often happens is, if you invite a podcaster to be on your show, if it's a fit, a lot of times they'll then reciprocate once they've had that experience and connection
100%.
with you, right? Like, like when Chris and I met immediately, it was like, oh, we should be on each other's shows. Like it was this, like, yeah. And the other thing is about sponsorship and giveaways. Like, I think these are incredible strategies. The more people that you have invested in your show in one way or another, whether that's a sponsor, whether you're doing a giveaway with, products or whatever, then they will share. It gives them a reason to share and connect as well. So one of the other speakers in my course is Scott Carson. He hosts a Note real estate investing podcast, and he has 100K podcast sponsors a year, and he's built towards that. And the other, I think, misconception is that you need to have a certain number of downloads or been around for a certain amount of time to monetize or to get sponsors. And I don't think that's the case. You can literally get your sponsors before you even launch your show. And so basically you can be making money from the beginning if you know how to do it. So I know Keri did that. We'll talk to her in a minute. Chris, how were you able to get your, sponsors and whatnot?
Right. Well, the sponsors came to me, to be honest with you. I know it probably sounds really awful for me to say it that way for people that don't have a sponsor or something. I was the guy that when I started the show, I was like, I don't want to have any sales pitch at the beginning or the end or the middle. There's nothing worse for a listener thinking about, no offense to people that do this. It's just, it goes with my message, what I was trying to deliver at the time. At the beginning of the show, they'll do like a pitch of their sponsor. You can mention it, but stand by for a quick message before we start today's show. That's cool. But if you're taking away from the content and your guest and you're asking a question, then you stop the show. There's nothing more worse than that. So it's presenting a sponsor with an opportunity to let them be a part of your journey. And if that's your angle, then they'll come to you, because you're making them a part of your journey and say, what can we do for you long term? So every relationship I've ever developed in my life, or one meaningful, it took time to develop. And that's led by my heart and led by my intention behind that relationship. And how could I really help you more than you can help me as well? So that's one tip on the sponsors. Is best way to I was listening to a show the other day. I love podcasts, by the way. So I was listening to a show. I can't remember who it was. It'll come to me later. The best way to make money is don't try to make money. Right? It's like lead with, your focus, lead with your value. And that's one way to doing it. The ideas will come to you if you're really pinpoint on your approach. Yeah,
I think it's really important too to reframe how we think of it. If we're trying to sell, then I know that's your area, Chris, is selling, but I feel like when I reframed it to think of like, I'm just providing an opportunity for people to connect with more things that I love and care about. Like, I only have sponsors that I feel really passionate about. And then when I'm sharing my own products and services, I'm sharing a way that people that I know can help them. Right. So it's about reframing it and thinking about it differently. But if you're just like trying to make the money come in just for that sake alone, then it can be definitely a struggle.
One thing to add, and I don't want to take away from the other panelists, because I think what they have to bring is something very important. People, when they're trying to sell, they're trying to sell too hard, and they're hard pitching people. Another thing is a lot of podcasters feel iffy about selling, and they don't know how to go about delivering that message properly to get people really interested in whatever they're trying to sell in the back end. One way of going about doing that is giving away something for free. Like, here's one training, here's two trainings. And then now you capture them on an email list, and now you can think about them long-term. Play the long play, not the short-term play. A lot of people are trying to sell, like, oh, hey, I'm going to sell you this $27 program. Well, if there's a $27 program, and I'm not going to look at you the same way if you're a person of influence, because why are you selling it for $27? You should be giving it away for free, and you're playing the long ride, the long pitch. That's the way I look at it when you're looking at trying to sell. Like, selling is where you don't sell. You have to listen to what your buyers and listen to what your audience is telling you. I recommend feedback forms. Put something on your link. Hey guys, tell me what you want me to talk about. What do you want to hear more of me? If I did sell something on this, what would you want me to position? How? Why? Ask them. They'll tell you. if you ask them the right way with the right intention behind it. I think that's something that Laura does so great, that, obviously she's a psychic too, on top of that, that no one has to really tell her exactly what it is. She'll read through that and go through the energy and go, okay, this is what this person really needs from me, and or what they're actually really seeking. And that's important.
Absolutely. It's really important to pay attention and provide a lot of value. I think that's one of the things that's just great about podcasting. If you're doing it right, is that you are providing so much for free. Like, you don't charge for podcasts, unless you're doing like a premium show or something. So you're automatically providing a lot, giving away so much. And then people feel like they know, like, and trust you. And there's something about hearing a person's voice versus like a blog post that I think really stands out. And last year when I attended PodFest, they gave some statistics at the State of Podcasting event that I think were so profound. I'm sure they've changed because this was about a year ago, but still it's going to be approximate. So at that time, there were 250,000 active podcasts in the Apple Podcast Store, which is still where like 70% of people listen to podcasts and consume podcasts, compared to like 650 million blogs. So it's a lot easier to get heard and to create that connection in the podcasting space than in blogs. And it's pretty common for me to people that have listened to my show for years, and they feel like they know me, they like me, they trust me, and then they want to connect on a deeper level. All right, thanks, Chris. So Keri, let's go to you, talking about your strategies for getting sponsorships. So then you had sponsors right away at launch, which is pretty incredible.
I did. It was because of your training that I knew to do that, though. So I did. I started with a sponsorship package, which is how really I know a huge reason that it boomed as way it did, because people had an incentive. I was asking for, like, so basically what I did was go to a group of people who within, I think it took about 30 minutes for me to get 5 people to sponsor the show. And I put together a little sponsorship package, and it was valued at probably $150, $200 or something. And whenever people would review and share, they had to do both, review and share the show, they got put into the ability to be able to win the sponsorship package. And so I think, Chris said it so well. It's like, how can we get our listeners to share for us? And it's something that even with my books, and my book launched last year in December as well, and it's something that I keep questioning in my mind, is how can I get people, incentivize people to share? Because I think people don't necessarily naturally share. There's people in the world who are evangelists who will naturally share everything. Like, I share Laura's stuff. She doesn't even have to ask me, but not everybody will. Right. And not everybody who's listening will share unless they are told or requested, hey, you guys, if you're liking this, please go like and share. Give them an incentive to, because people are busy. People have things going on in their life. And I think that was a really big thing for people to really start, like, and it doesn't have to be sponsorship, but how can you incentivize people as listeners to help share your message? Because that's where it's going to get to the most, that's one way for it to get to a lot of people. So that's how I did that. And then I would say as well, like within my shows, I have created a form for my podcast when someone comes on to the show to fill out. And in it, I actually ask, do you have an affiliate program? And so I know who has things I can affiliate to. And so then, of course, like, why not sponsor that? Like, why not share that on the show? And why not give people an opportunity to go further with whatever they're talking about? And then it's a win for everybody. And I love creating those win-win-wins. It's like, of course, why not share your things and give people an opportunity to take your thing further, and we can both win financially. So that's like an automatic. So many of my shows have the opportunity to go further with that person, and it feels really empowered because everybody wins, and it's like, it feels so abundant. And so I love that part of sponsorship as well. And there was something that I really wanted to say as well that keeps coming up through this, like, as I'm listening to everybody, again, as a new person, because I think something that for me feels challenging when I first started this was expression. And it's so easy for all of you guys here who are like used to this and have been doing it for years to forget how hard it was at the beginning to find your voice and your expression. And so I just thought I'd say here with this, it's like, you find it no matter whether it's with sales, without sales, with ads, without ads, with this, without that, whatever your form is going to be, you find it by doing it. And I'm finding that personally, the more that I show up for the show and the more that I ask these questions of like, what do I really want to create on this platform? How does it going to look? How is it going to expand? How is it going to share? Who are the type of people that, I mean, because Wendy said it, like Wendy's coming up on my show sometime in the next month or so. Laura's been on my show, and it's because they don't say no, but it's like, I wouldn't have had the courage to ask them, these people who are, amazing in the podcast industry, but they're just saying to you, anyone who's here listening, I will say yes. And so it's really a beautiful thing to be able to say, well, how do I want to have and who? And just because they will say yes doesn't make it right for your show, right? Because some of the people that are in my field, it doesn't make it right for my show just to have you on. And so it's like, you get to find your expression, and you don't have to know the answer to begin with. And I think that's really important to be reminded of as you guys talk from this very professional down the road level. But as the new person, like, I didn't know what I was doing when I started. I didn't know. And the other thing I will say that I love what Chris said is that whilst I didn't know, I went out, and my first show it's like a showstopper. Like, if it doesn't grab you there, then leave. Because I open up a whole can of worms about the financial industry and about what's going on in the current financial situation. And I was like, as I was saying, I was like, okay, I guess I'm not going to hold back, because why? And it's like, because we get to have these expression channels that we get to really connect with more and more and more people. But you'll find that throughout the experience, and whether that's through sponsorships or whatever, however you grow it. And I think as far as that growth goes, like for me personally, the more that I even look at what does my expression want to say in its true and fullest form, I know that is what's going to resonate. So it's just the energy, as much as it is sponsorship, as much as it is sales, as much as it is anything, it's the energy that we bring to it, and that we allow ourselves to just find our flow in, that I think also will bring in magnetic attraction into people wanting to listen to your podcast and being real, raw, honest, authentic. And I'm definitely finding it's a place that you can do that in a way that you can't do anywhere else in the world. And for me, like I said earlier, when we started talking about this, like when you start to look at what's happening in social media now and the censorship and everything, it's like you get to really be seen and heard for your real self without being censored. And I think that in and itself is its own way of creating more sales, creating more leverage, getting your message heard, because people want to share that, because all of a sudden it's like they're really connecting with the truth of who you are, not the censored version that you get to put on every other piece of social media that gets to go out there. Especially, I will say, from my industry, right? There's much censorship that goes on right now. And so that's part of that too.
Yeah, that censorship piece I think is really important, because you're seeing a lot of censorship on various social media platforms. Being in an alternative health podcast category, and I've switched over time. Sometimes I'm in the spirituality category, sometimes I put myself in the alternative health category. But there's literally on social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, people that have just been literally their channels deleted, in some cases with no warning, no even explanation of why. And one of the things I love about podcasting is there aren't gatekeepers, right? If you want to start a show, if you have a message, you can have that. And because it's not just one platform, even if, let's say, Apple Podcast decides to block you, you could still direct all of your people to I'm on Spotify, I'm on Stitcher, on this other channel. There's multiple podcast hosting companies, and there's multiple distribution companies where you can listen. So I really love that, because if you value, freedom of speech and our ability to connect and communicate with people, this is significant. A couple other things that Keri brought up I want to mention is affiliate. So if you're not familiar with affiliate marketing or being an affiliate, it's basically when, as someone who refers someone, you get a commission. So it's this really beautiful thing where it's like a win-win. Someone's promoting something on your show, if you have a show, or you're promoting on someone else's show, and then you get a commission for that referral. And it's amazing how with affiliate stuff, it's very unpredictable. First of all, there's times when I will make nothing, and then suddenly I'm making thousands of dollars years later. That's happened. There was one particular affiliate where I literally got nothing for a year, and then that next year, all of a sudden I made thousands. And it's you just don't know. And podcasting has what's called the long tail. And this is different than a lot of other types of media, where basically once it's out and there's a shelf life of, a week, 2 weeks, a month, and then it's kind of old news and it kind of cycles out, and it's even hard to find it. So you look at Instagram, Facebook, if you're trying to find something that that's older than that, it's actually quite difficult to find it. But it's different with podcasting because people tend to consume it like Netflix. They find a show they like, and then they listen to everything. So I frequently have people connect with me and my show, and they listen to all 10 years of episodes, like in a month or two, which is pretty amazing to me. But it just shows that kind of super fan that's possible to cultivate and connect with. And also because it's very niche down, like when you're on a radio or television, unless it's a very targeted show, it's usually you're reaching and connecting with a broad variety of people, and they may or may not be interested in, very specifically what you have to offer. Whereas if they're listening to your show, they're really interested usually in that particular topic, which I think is so incredible and valuable in terms of like the people that are listening are way more likely to be your demographic target market, whatever it is that you're wanting to engage and connect with, which is really valuable. So let's go to Wendy. I'd like to hear, your journey with monetization, any tips, strategies that you have been able to do to be successful.
Yeah, so I've never attempted to monetize my show. What I have attempted to do, and I've gotten offers, and I was like, $100 for like a show, like, no, I'm gonna pass on that. But I did one because like with Libsyn, they have all these, like my podcast is hosted on Libsyn, and they have all these different people that will monetize for you, and they'll send you emails with different offers. And we took one. It was like for like a dog. It was like a dog gift every month. Like it was like a surprise box for your dog. And it wasn't a good fit. And I don't know why we did it, but they paid us like $110. And then it took me like an hour to do the ad, and they wanted me to like redo it. I was like, it was just not worth my time. But I had another podcast that I created, a second one called the Coronavirus Support Series. And that one, we got $30,000 worth of sponsorships before we even started it. And then that was because of relationships that I'd had for affiliates that I'd promoted from my other podcast. So that one we were able to monetize, but I've just never, I guess I've never wanted ads on my show, just like I don't have Google ads in my website, because I felt like it kind of like cheapened the website. And I think I have better ROI with other things like my own ad for my own products. So what I do, as opposed to having like a hard sell ad, is I have a quiz that I created called heavymetalsquiz.com. And so it's more focused and targeted to my listeners that are looking to figure out their body burden of metals and how to detox them. So I created this quiz that people can easily remember from the show. And then they can go to that, and I get their email, and then I can market to them after that. So they go, but we had to create this quiz and then a whole funnel afterward, and a whole, like, they get like a free video series afterwards, and they just go into this marketing funnel that we created. And so for me, that has a lot more ROI for me than getting like a sponsorship for the podcast.
Yeah, this is something I really want to highlight, is that when people tend to think of monetizing podcasts or making it, they almost always go to sponsorships first, sponsorship and advertising. And so there's generally three main ways to make money directly through the podcast. One is sponsorships and advertising, then there's affiliate programs, and then there's selling your own products and services. And most people tend to focus when they're new on the first category. And I think promoting your own products and services is actually the most impactful and makes the most sense in terms of finances. And unless you have like a really great sponsor that's a total fit and they're willing to pay you for your time. But yeah, you do have to be careful of like spending a lot of time doing an ad, and then you're like, here's $30. And it's like, it could just feel like a real drain. Whereas if you're promoting something that you're offering, they're already listening to because they like what you do and what you're saying, and there's more long-term potential with that. But there's actually a fourth category, which I've recently become aware of, which is that there's a lot of times bigger business opportunities that come in through the relationships that you build through podcasting. So it's not directly like I'm making money from the podcast, but I think that's really where the most opportunity comes in, is like these connections that you make. And then it leads to like a whole other level of business. So I know, Keri, you just had that happen with one of your podcast guests. Do you mind mentioning that? With Roscoe, I think it was.
Yeah, with Roscoe, how our partnership is going.
Yeah, because it started out with him just being on your show. And then like now there's this whole other business thing that's that started?
Yeah, it's true. So actually it started with my book. So with my book, I wrote that my book is called The New Wealth, Magnetize Abundance, Hold Your Wealth and Leave a Legacy. And it's this very futuristic thought process of where we are in the current financial system and how do we get to this new level of finances and banking that is coming into the world. And in the end, I realized that I had to, that I wanted to share more about digital currency, and I wanted to give people a place to go that they could trust the person, because there's a lot of dodgy people in the world right now and a lot of dodgy stuff happening in that space. And so I asked him to be part of the book, and has now become part of the podcast, um and definitely a big part of a business, like in some way a business partnership. He's become my mentor. We're really working to build the coaching aspect of his business. I'll be like one of his little test babies to go through and create the results, much like with Laura. Like I came in and I just did it. I was like, if you guys are ready for somebody who's ready to come in and do the thing and create the results, that's where I'm at. Like I have a message that's really important to be in the world. And and so Roscoe and I have really definitely teamed up in a big way to really share and help each other grow our businesses and both. And it's really interesting because it benefits both too. And I'll say it this way with the podcast, like I didn't get the podcast. My podcast wasn't even launched when I first interviewed him. He's number 3. He's one of my first, and he is, I think, the first interview on my podcast. And when we finished, he was like, Keri, can I send that to my group right now? Like, do I have to wait? And I was like, yes, you can. That's fine. And he credited me. I've gotten more growth in my media because of it. And, because I will say that when we interview people, we give people the permission to speak in a way they may not. We ask questions that, I actually have someone here, Daryl's on here, his wife, Keri, I interviewed. She might've been my first interview actually on the podcast. She's one of the two of them are my first few. And, I asked a lot of questions that normally wouldn't be asked. And I think that's also part of being a podcaster, is the joy of learning the interview. If you're going to be an interview podcaster, it's something I've studied for years before, so it wasn't necessarily a new thing for me, but I think it's something that we get to dive into as we move into the podcasting space. And how can you really allow somebody to shine? Because then all of a sudden they get to feel like this rock star, and they get to share something and express something they may not have otherwise, and then they want to share it with other people. And so I think that's, again, another part of the growth, because then they're going to want to share it with their audience, and the connection that you have. Like we get this opportunity to ask amazing. I'm like, look at Laura and Wendy here. Like I got to ask you both amazing questions that I wouldn't have gotten to ask otherwise. And we give people that platform and that permission as well. So I think that then these relationships grow, and who knows what can happen from them. So, like here I sit with Laura again, like you just ask the question, how do we monetize from that? Like here I sit wanting to share Laura's stuff, and and of course I'm going to continue. And like I know the two of us will be entangled in many ways over the next years. There's no doubt in my mind about it. And Wendy as well, like I became an affiliate for Harmony and all the same things, of course, because why wouldn't I help people to raise their vibration in the world in whatever way that exists as well. And so there's always all sorts of ways that you can really start to deepen relationships and build partnerships, I think.
Absolutely. And I just want to highlight that it's really easy to start a podcast technically now. And I feel like a lot of people that are wanting to start a podcast, they let that stop them. And now if you literally can be on a Zoom call, you can start a podcast. And there's a lot of people that are already generating content. They're doing stuff on Facebook, they're doing stuff on Instagram, they're doing things on YouTube, they're running webinars. And I'm like, look, you can just pull that content and create a podcast out of it. So I want to make that clear that this isn't about adding another to-do item to your to-do list that everyone already has, like a large to-do list, I'm guessing. It's really about basically leveling up everything you're already doing and making it more impactful and for the longer term. So if you want to host a podcast, you need a hosting platform. There's free ones like Anchor. So that's like a website host. You need a podcast hosting company, and then you need distribution and you need content. Those are the basics. You don't even have to edit if that's a pain point. I'll also share in my course, editing tips on how to get things edited with more ease. So that's important. And then the other thing is you do get better at it over time. Like, yeah, I've been podcasting for 10 years. I'm very comfortable on the fly now. When I started, I was nervous and I had pre-prepared questions that I asked every single person. I don't do that anymore. I mean, I think it's fine to do that, but whatever you need to do to get started, do it. And don't feel like you have to be perfect or have everything figured out before you start, because it's literally through the process of doing it that you figure it out, in my opinion. And then also get mentors, get a team. If you're interested in the course, one of the things that we do is basically we are a launch team for everyone in the course. And so you automatically have a built-in team, even if you don't have people in your life that you feel like would support you. So this has been awesome. I'd love to just check in to see with anyone who's joined us today, if they have any questions for any of us here on the panel. Shelly says, you guys rock. Thank you, Shelly. You rock too. Shelly is launching her podcast very shortly, or she may have just launched it, which is amazing.
May I say something on Keri's point? I
Absolutely.
think it was so
Yeah.
impactful when she's talking about like bringing on guests. One tip, if people don't know how to frame some of their questioning, one thing that I can give away pretty quickly and it will make an impact. When you sign that person on or you book them in, if you have a team, if you're doing it directly, whatever, ask them, how many other shows have you been on that you would like me to listen to? Because there's no other way of raising the bar in your conversation. If you listen to Wendy's show when she was on this show and this show and this show, and pay attention to something that she drops subtle, like just drops, and then ask her to expand on it. Hey, I was listening to you, Wendy, on this show, and you mentioned XYZ. Can you expand like what you really meant behind that? Now you've just taken yourself to another level of questioning that the other podcaster maybe wasn't 100% present in that moment to ask a rebuttal question to what Wendy said or what Keri said. That's one way to really stand out from the pack on asking questions. So just to add on that, Keri, great stuff. Love that.
Yeah, I had a thought on that. I was used to listen
Mhm.
to Sean Croxton. He's not doing his health podcast anymore, but he'd have a guest on and he would quote something from their book. Like he was reading every book from every show. I was
Right.
like,
You
"That's
just,
crazy."
it triggers them to want to know more. Like, oh, wow, that person listened to this. That's the one way. I mean, obviously, it's one of the biggest tricks in the world. The best way to get someone interested in you is be interested in them and have a genuine interest, not just a interest. I'm going to ask this set of questions. When I used to, I guess in the last year, 2020, I started going on a lot of shows, and I started to notice a pattern. And that's what I do for a living, anyways, noticing patterns of behavior. I started to notice a pattern of questioning that they would ask. I'm like, I'll answer these questions. It's fine. But can I answer them now? So that way you can go a little deeper and not to be, obviously a jerk about it. Just that I would like to, okay, that's a great question. Can I touch on this part of the question? Like, absolutely, Chris, just do your thing. Cause you don't want to take over their show if you're a guest, I guess you would say. But sometimes I'll get to a certain point with the way that I answer a question, I'm framing and setting them up for the next question, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think that the more interviews you do, the better you get at it. And the more you host, the more you're a better interviewee. I mean, this is so valuable. A huge part of my business is the media aspect. And also, if you're interested in bigger media opportunities, and media opportunities are great for growing your business, your platform, then having a show and having been on a lot of shows is really important. So when I was on Will Ferrell's podcast, I asked the producer about, their process, because I was really curious. Like, this isn't a show you even pitch. This is where, like, they invite you on. And she said she spent several hours on my website before they even reached out to me. And so making sure, that you have whatever it is, your show, your media appearances, everything front and center. And I really recommend, being on other people's shows. Like I said, being a host is one of the best ways to get more placements yourself, to get on other people's shows. But if you are pitching, just a brief piece of advice, please do your research. I think this is kind of what Chris was talking about, like research that person, see what they do, listen to their other shows, and make sure that the pitch really is connected. I get a lot of pitches that are like, dear John, dear, Jill, whatever, random names where it's clearly been a cut and paste jobby. So it's important to, take the time and the effort. Well, this has been amazing. I'd love to is there anything else that any of our panelists would like to share before we finish today?
Yeah, I had one thing I wanted to share about, repurposing your content, where for
Yes.
me, I think things really changed a lot for me, where I'm sitting here, recording an audio podcast, but I decided to do it on video as well, and then post that on YouTube. And then right now we're having someone like optimize it, doing search engine optimization on YouTube, but that really, there's like a whole other audience, and I've had more downloads on YouTube than I have on the actual podcast. And then I also did transcripts of the podcast, again, to repurpose that. And so that gigantic transcript of each podcast creates search engine optimization when people are searching for the topic of the show on Google or other shows. So for me, that was also really huge in growing my website and growing my audience when people were searching for the topic that my show is on. So the repurposing content is really important as well.
Amazing. I love that. And the more places you're on, the better. Research shows that people tend to consume content on whatever platform they're on, meaning like YouTubers don't necessarily go listen to Spotify, listen to Apple Podcasts. And I, even as someone who consumes content, I'm that way. When I'm on Apple Podcasts, I'm on Apple Podcasts. When I'm on YouTube, I'm on YouTube. So it's really important to be on as many of these platforms as possible. So if you're interested in starting a podcast or growing, monetizing your podcast more, my podcast course, of which all these amazing panelists are a guest speaker on various topics, starts on Thursday. If you have heard about this from any of them, please feel free to mention their name and you'll get $100 credit, which is amazing. It starts on Thursday. It's a 9-week course. I'm putting the link in the chat. You can also ask me any questions that you have about the course. Other people that are in the course, which we've mentioned, Adam Shively, he's a rock star. I think everyone here is connected with Adam. He's one of those people that you just want to meet. And that's one of the incredible benefits of taking these courses is like you had to get to connect with these amazing people, build relationships with them. And Adam is incredible at building community. So if you're really wanting to build your community and then also you can build your business from that, he's a great expert on that. And then Scott Carson, he hosts a real estate podcast. He's also very well known within the podcast community. And Marissa Iman, she is an incredible voiceover artist, musician. She has a great meditation podcast. So she's going to be talking about running a business that's connected with your podcast, as well as how to incorporate music and voiceover in your show. So yeah, Chris, I think she's your intro
she's
person,
my,
right?
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, listen, no joke. I've waited forever to have a voiceover type of person, like for the intro, like, hey, stand by for a quick message. You have no idea how many people have sent in I have more feedback rather just from that, having Marissa do that. She goes, I don't know who the voice is of Windjet right now or your show or the Win Effect. Who is that voice? And then I'm just gathering names, and that'll be obviously ammunition for her. I'm like, all right, hey, these people are looking for XYZ. That's one great way of being able to help out people that are really good at specific areas of podcasts. It's all about community, and you mentioned. I love that. But yeah, just a shout out to Marissa. Love the voice. The voice definitely matches the show for sure.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Marissa's one of those people. She's just like, oh, I love Marissa. She's just an amazing human. So again, however you do it, I definitely recommend for people to podcast, to connect with podcast community. The more you learn, the more you connect with other podcasters, you just build these deep relationships and help each other. Sarah says, miss the panel. Definitely. We will share the recording. So no worries whatsoever. Well, I just want to thank everyone for listening today. I want to thank our amazing panelists. You guys all rock. And I feel like everyone's very humble. Like Chris he's a member of the Forbes Business Council, you guys. Like, this is a big deal. Keri is an amazing wealth, coach. And I worked with her, so I see the impacts of that. And Wendy too. Wendy has a huge business, and I love that, we connected at this event and we've been able to see each other grow, and everyone here is super inspiring, and I'm excited for everyone who is able to connect with them. And I'm excited for everyone here to start your podcast or grow your podcast. It is such a high return on investment compared to almost anything else that I've done in my life. And so that's why I get so excited and passionate about other people doing it. I literally everyone should start a podcast. And I realize not everyone, but honestly, almost everyone should have a podcast. So thank you so much, Chris. That's the best way to learn more about me. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, and wishing you the best. Thanks for taking this time. I know everyone's really busy. Feel free to reach out, connect. I'll put my email in here as well. And also feel free to reach out to me on social media. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and look forward to connecting with you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Laura. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. It was great. I enjoyed
Oh,
it.
thanks, Chris. Look forward to
Thoroughly
talking to
enjoyed
you on my podcast next week.
I know. I'm really excited. Really excited. Keri, anytime you want to come on, let's make it happen. Okay.
You guys should
Anytime.
totally connect. You guys should,
Anytime.
I think for you too, especially given your topics, your show topics are perfect.
Yeah. As she was speaking, I mean, well, I didn't really know. I knew the panelists, and the only reason I knew who Wendy was just because I was mentioning to Adam. Adam was supposed to be here. And then
Yeah.
he mentioned it. He was like, "Oh yeah," and I was like, "But more that she was speaking, I was like, wow, we're so aligned. It's ridiculous on certain messages." I was like, "Wow!" I was like, "Oh man, I can't wait to have a chance." And no offense to anybody else, it's just that when she was talking about, especially the financial side, a lot of people they get a shy away from finance,
Right.
and I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe it's just the whole you mentioned mindset, the money mindset. Once you remove those barriers, like making money is the easy part. But that's really difficult to say it that way to people that are striving for that.
Yeah,
You got to
because
develop more value. Yeah, love
it's
it.
totry mindset and programming is like,
Oh yeah,
it's like, I don't know, 95% of the
Yeah.
the situation. So yeah, you guys I think you guys are both tagged in the talk, but I'm happy to
Sure.
send an intro email or whatever you guys want to connect.
yeah.
as
Just
well.
at Chris at Winjet, you'll find me.
All right, cool. I look forward to it.
Thanks.
Y'all take
guys.
care. Thanks, guys.
See you
Bye.
guys.
All right, bye bye.